Yeah.
Just a combination of this and that.
Which it's not just the one system with your have those. So you'll
So be it. The meeting is now in order, or out of order, or whichever is correct. Staff have attendance?
yes.
Yes, we do have a quorum.
We have a quorum with the people that are online. Welcome, those of you that are joining us online. Did we have any public comment?
We haven't received any requests, nor did we see any public members who would like to comment.
All right. The next item is the consent agenda. Do any of the commissioners have anything they wish to remove from the consent agenda? Anybody online have anything they wish to remove?
No.
Hearing none, I'll call for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
And a seconder? All in favor?
Aye.
Barry?
Aye.
All right, that motion is passed. We have no items removed then from the consent agenda. So we'll go directly to items for information. Sorry. Yeah, okay. I'll call on Ray now. I was going to cut him off.
I'm sorry, you're cutting him off.
Please go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, if I may. If you recall, a month ago at your last meeting, we had a presentation on the urban transit provider, the Connect Transit. And I thought it would be appropriate for the commission to know, and for staff too, to know more about the rural side, the rural transit provider. And it's, as the county is not just urban, as you all know, it's urban, rural, is really a mix. For staff, we look at the county as a whole. And so today we're so happy to have Laura Dick with us. And your title, is it the president or the CEO? I mean, everything.
Bottle washer, whatever you want to call me.
She's done an amazing job, and she'll explain just the complexity, the operation, just it's multi-county service, and so it's not just McLean County, and people in the rural area, getting the benefit of the transit services provided from the rural to the urban area a lot of times, and for different purposes, right? Could be shopping, could be medical appointments, could be recreational purposes, or see families or other reasons. So after the presentation, if you would put that urban transit and the rural transit providers, that, just to kind of keep that in mind as part of the transportation planning that we do, we work with folks like Laura and on a really regular basis. And also we doing the administration for some of the funding, processing for her and for her company, not company, but the entity. And so just will give a little bit background. And so I'll wait and look forward to your presentation.
Well, thank you very much for having us. Thank you for helping me with the slides.
No problem. If you guys online cannot see the slides as they're advancing, please go ahead and speak up and let me know. You should be good though.
All right.
See them.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm here for Show Bus Public Transportation, and thank you so much for having us. I'm going to give you a little bit of history and then try to fit rural transportation into the overall picture of public transportation. So Show Bus grew out of a study that was done by the Senior Advisory Council of McLean and Livingston County back in 1975. And what they were concerned about was that the rural areas were losing basic services, doctors, grocery stores, and leaving people behind who did not know how to drive. So when they set up the advisory council, they were targeted toward trying to come up with an alternative transportation mode other than car. And as a study project, they met from 1975 to 79, bless their hearts, all volunteers, and came up with a plan that was good enough to pull down a grant that got 2 buses. And from there, they talked Meadows Mennonite Retirement Community into adopting the program underneath their not-for-profit umbrella. So from that time to 2009, we were actually part of Meadows Mennonite Retirement Community, and our name was Show Bus Public Transportation. Now, I'll tell you what it means, but we don't advertise it. We just stay with Show Bus and we put up with, do you go to the theater? No, not really, because it's easier than trying to use the language because it's too old-fashioned now. But what it stands for is Seniors and Handicapped on Wheels Bus to Urban Services, which was acceptable language back then. So when we started, our goal was to serve seniors and folks with disabilities. And that's how we got our initial money. Then in 1988, and I'll go back a little bit to tell you some of the more complex history, but in 1988, our system pretty much fundamentally changed because the feds came in and said, counties, you are now eligible for grants to fund rural public transportation, but the systems have to be open to all people. And McLean County said, okay. And with the agreement that Meadows Mennonite Retirement Community would remain the umbrella, McLean County then became the primary participant, which, thank you very much. That was great. And we received money then beginning, and that was the first formal relationship of McLean County to Show Bus. The next big change for our system, and we began to grow. Okay, we started with 2 counties and we started expanding out. Then the next big change was in fiscal year 2008, when the state finally agreed that a rural transportation, if sponsored by counties, could participate in what's called the Downstate Operating Assistance Program, or as it's known, DOPE. So the first time I heard about DOPE, I was at a lunch meeting and one of the urban providers turned to me and said, you know, we really need to get you some DOPE money. And I blinked a couple times, but I was pretty desperate for money. And I said, okay, let me hear more about this. Well, it turned out to be the Downstate Operating Assistance Program. This was huge. This meant, and we're a very fortunate state, public transit in the state of Illinois through Downstate Operating Assistance Program provides 65% reimbursement of eligible expenses. That is huge. And with that, our system really expanded. Today, we serve 9 counties. So I'm going to show you a couple pictures, but first of all, McLean County is huge. Show Bus serves in our 9 counties, 3 of the largest counties in the state, McLean, Livingston, and Iroquois. And I always love to show the rural perspective, what we drive through, because you tend to think of buses running in urban areas. So here are some pictures. This is actually from McLean County. And the next is a montage of various pictures we've taken throughout our state. And then if you go to the next one, this is our main facility, our administrative, our maintenance, and some of our storage facilities up in Chenoa. This was funded by a capital grant given to McLean County. That's the old Heller dealership. Yeah, it was fantastic. We're supposed to be remodeling it, but honestly, we feel so fortunate to be there after living in questionable places that it seems like a mansion to us. But again, it's very rural. Now, this is a picture just of the 6 counties that McLean County sponsors. And it's going from east to west: Iroquois, Ford, Livingston, McLean, DeWitt, and Macon. In addition, by other primary participants, we now serve Mason and Logan to the west, and then just to the north, Kankakee County, which is just below the collar counties. So it's kind of big, and you can't see it really well, but there are blue lines running through there, and it shows our routes. And if you go to the next slide, and if you can see the blue lines, which take up quite a bit of central Illinois, that's where we run. And it really doesn't show all of our routes. That's just the majority of the routes in the 6-county area. So we're a pretty spread out system. The next slide shows buses. And I like to show this slide because when we think of buses, the first, probably all of us are familiar with school bus. That's by far the biggest fleet in the United States. It's huge. It's unbelievable. And keeping it going, which is such a wonderful thing for schools to do, is an enormous expense for school districts. They really struggle to maintain transportation. And in my mind, they do a fantastic job. I don't know how they do it. To the upper right, you can see what would be called an intercity bus or a charter bus. They're still private. It would be Greyhound, Peoria Charter. They come and go. They used to be much more prevalent in the smaller towns. They've dropped a lot of their service in smaller towns, which is really too bad. And then on the lower right would be what you might call a special services bus. Nursing homes will have them. Sometimes schools will have special activity buses that look a little bit like that. And then on the lower left would be a bus like Connect Transit. And we're right in the middle, which makes sense because we're kind of a hybrid, pitiful stepchild of the other ones. And we have kind of an unusual history that sets us very much apart from the urban system. We are public transit like urban, but our history is very much different and our goals are very much different. If you go to the next slide. Whenever the feds step in and fund a program, you know it's really in trouble. And what happened there are all sorts of histories and people will argue exactly what happened, but as cars became more prevalent, there was a push to make public transit go to rubber wheel transportation. In other words, buses, away from the intercity trains, which we had quite a few in our area actually that ran, or the trolleys. And for a multitude of reasons, by the 1960s, those systems, which were private, almost all of them were going bankrupt, and some actually did go bankrupt. And by that time, the feds were getting really nervous. All you have to think about is Chicago without buses, or New York without buses, or St. Louis without buses. And that's why the feds stepped in. They realized that they had to protect alternatives to the automobile within cities, especially for, and look at the name, it says urban mass transit. The whole impetus for the first funding of public transportation was to move the masses. The people who could not afford a private car, who were economic generators for the inner city, they needed them moved to get them to jobs. And that was the primary pusher for the original funding for transit. Luckily for us, it got refined over time. The first thing that refined us was in Section 504 in 1973, made it a mandate that any program that was federally funded could not discriminate against disability. This was a huge deal. This was before the ADA. And people really struggled with this, but the original buses did not have lifts. If you were in a wheelchair, you could not ride the buses. And actually, when I started in the system, there were still systems with buses that were not accessible. Took a long time to make them accessible. But that was the beginning of another way of looking at public transit. Not just moving the masses, but what about everyone? And that was the Section 504 of 1973. That started the discussion. No money, but discussion, which was important. Section 16 of 1975 actually was the first funding. And what it said was, well, let's fund seniors and folks with disabilities if public transportation cannot provide for them. And you could say it was the beginning of paratransit, like the little buses you see within Bloomington Normal, but really it was more empowering social service agencies to get buses. That's what it really did. And that Section 16 was where Show Bus's first buses came from. We were under a 501c3 charity under Meadows Mennonite Retirement Community. We got our 2 buses from Section 16. It was mainly to give buses to entities that were trying to meet the needs of special populations. And that's really important. From the beginning, it was not to move the masses. It was to move those at high risk. And the first ones defined as high risk were seniors and folks with disabilities. That was the beginning of Show Bus. 1975, 70, it took that from there until 79 when we got the buses. Another big change, because of course we continued to whine, was Section 18 of UMTA in 1978. That was the first time that money began to flow, operating money. 16 came with no operating money. It only gave you the buses, but not the money to run it. And what Section 18 did then was it provided operating funds, but you had to run public transportation. And here it gets a little strange. The Fed said, okay, you have to run public transportation, but when you do it, you've still got to emphasize seniors, folks with disabilities, and let's add low income. So what that meant was, yes, we were open to public transportation, but when we designed routes or service, we had to first look at those at-risk populations. We weren't looking for masses. We weren't looking, say, one of the most popular routes on Connect would be connected to the university. You know, lots of students who need to move lots of places. We would not be allowed to build a route like that that was targeting a non-high-risk population. And then the next big thing that really impacted us was the ADA of 1990. Folks with disabilities, they were the last group to be afforded civil rights. And I always like to remember that. We think that people have had civil rights for a long time. The answer is no. 1990 was the first time that folks with disabilities were afforded civil rights. And this started a whole new discussion that really impacted transit. One of the most interesting was full access versus effective access. And the only way I can describe that, it came out of civil rights, and effective access would be similar to segregated schools. Effective access means separate but equal. And as that began to be seen as not a proper answer, so it also began to be seen as not a proper answer for public transit. ADA said, look, we want full and effective access. We want cities and rural to have buses with lifts. And we also want special service if mass transit in urban areas are not met and meeting the needs of high-risk people. And that's where you got your fixed route, bus route service with the lifts, and you got the paratransit, the little buses that run around Bloomington Normal. We're most like the paratransit, okay? The difference is Connect Transit is held to a standard still of serving the masses. If they spend too much of their money on paratransit, they can actually get dinged by the feds. We're just the opposite. That's why we exist, is to be paratransit. So we come to public transportation sort of from the opposite poles of service. And that's always interesting when we all get together because we kind of talk two different languages.
Yeah, just so you know, too, they are listening to your presentation.
Yes, well, I think that they agreed. It's absolutely true. You know, we have to keep in mind the standards they must meet for federal, and we also have to meet our federal standards, but it doesn't mean they're the same. Okay. Beyond our history, the discussion still goes on, and beyond our history, because here we are, we're finally getting some money. We're finally getting buses out in the rural areas. We're finally hitting the high-risk populations. But beyond our history, new languages began to develop, and it was getting really interesting before COVID, pre-COVID. Does anyone remember? One concept that's been around forever but started moving into mainstream was universal access. What that means in terms of transit is, let's not build a bus and then modify it for people that we perceive have barriers to mobility. Let's look at it and figure out a design that is great for everybody. For instance, I hate lifts. The kneeling buses is a great example of universal access. A bus kneels down, the ramp comes out, everybody walks up the ramp. Moms with babies and strollers can get up the ramp. If you have a grocery cart, you can get up the ramp without hauling it up the stairs. It's a terrific design for everybody. And it doesn't segregate those who need to use lifts. You know, you think about it, if you're in a wheelchair and everybody's walking up the stairs and you have to sit there until the lift's deployed, and everybody's freezing to death in the bus because the lift's deployed, then they put you on the lift and they lift you up in the air and they put you in the bus, you're really segregated out from everyone else who's using the service. So universal design is just a fantastic concept. And it came out of planning, and it's very cool. And it was beginning to catch fire within transit. Mobility management is the idea that you put the people that you're moving at the center of your planning, not your efficient routes. Now that still caused a whole lot of problems. But we're moving toward it a little bit. You might have heard the concept first mile, last mile, where people are trying to think, well, if we drop someone off at a bus stop and they can't quite get, what do we do if they have to still go 2 miles? And, you know, Lyft and Uber, all sorts of different ideas have come to the forefront. But that's because of mobility management. That's saying people should be at the center, not buses. Livability planning, that's a wonderful idea. Somehow transportation has to be part of the community. We have to, especially as our population ages, we're beginning to be aware, we can't just keep building communities based on cars, because not everybody can afford a car, and as we get older, we may not have access to a car. So all of these wonderful new ideas were coming up, and it was really great, because all of a sudden, we weren't quite the poor, pitiful stepchild. We might have had some good ideas in rural transit, and it was very exciting to hear some of our concerns beginning to be more front and center, okay? And then, unfortunately, well, go ahead.
Next one.
And this is the framework within which we were working. Right now, in our mission, our vision statement will be at the end, we are primarily a door-to-door response. That means we go up to the door of a private home, we pick up people, we escort them to the bus if they need it, get them on the bus, help them with their groceries or bags or whatever, or use the lift. All of our buses are lift equipped. When we get them to their destination, we escort them to the public door of whatever their destination is. If it's a public lobby, drivers are allowed to escort them in. We are not allowed to go through the door sill of a private house. That's a different type of service, and we haven't overcome that barrier yet. We also have in some of our bigger towns what's called kind of close to a bus stop service, and that would be in Watsika and Pontiac, and in other grantees have other, but we're sticking with just your 6 counties. So it's Watsika and Pontiac in your area right now, and we just have a bus looping through those cities every hour. And if someone needs that door-to-door service, the bus zoops off the route, picks them up and brings them back on the route, and we go around on a route. And it's called deviated fixed route. And it combines both door-to-door and elements of the fixed route. No one has to call for a reservation. They can just show up at the bus stop and we'll pick them up. We also have flag down service. That means that if someone goes and waves at us, we're going to stop the bus if we safely can and pick them up, see what we can do to help them. We have special medical service. Unfortunately, we're way low on drivers, but when we have drivers, we will send a single bus out to pick someone up if they have a special medical need, and there is no way that they can tolerate or be served by standard demand response service or deviated fixed route service. And we're allowed to do that. And it's terrific because that's part of our federal mandate. So it's really great. I mean, we're transit, but we're also social services. And most of us really enjoy that part of the service. And the last part is if we have not-for-profits who need transportation, we're allowed to serve them. And that would be hospitals, churches, adult day centers, anything like that. As long as they are not for profit, we're allowed to do it.
Laura, is there a high need for that special medical service?
Okay.
And if you don't, go ahead.
The major difficulty with special medical service, there's tremendous need for it. And a lot of it should be funded through Medicaid.
Yeah.
Because, if you have a disability, most likely you're on some type of disability income and you're eligible for that. The state, as many states have done, have farmed out that work. And they farmed it out to managed care agencies. Unfortunately, those MCOs, as we call them, are for profit. So they're looking for a profit, right? And the state also said, well, Medicaid says that transportation is part of Medicaid because that's a federal mandate. So do your best with transit. Doing their best ain't great. I think that's about all I can say.
Okay.
So what we've seen in the last years is a tremendous loss of service to people who really need special medical transportation. How can we step in? That's really hard to say. But I will tell you, it's a huge problem. People thought Lyft would be able to do it, Uber.
Mm-hmm.
These services don't make a profit. That's the deal. You finally have to come down to acknowledge that there are some services that don't make a profit. We used to do a tremendous amount. The MCOs would rather not have anything to do with us.
And most of the time, with Uber or other services like that, they're really not equipped to necessarily deal with the needs of the patient or the individual a lot of times. So
that's exactly right. We thought things were going to get a little bit better. There was legislation pending that looked like maybe the state would have to take more responsibility and look at it more closely. Unfortunately, the really powerful lobby happened to be the ambulance services, which were in terrible trouble because they weren't getting paid, for one thing. So the legislation then addressed their needs, but didn't address the wider need of non-emergency transportation services. Okay. So it's a huge, huge problem, and they are not looking at us to solve it. The MCOs, the managed care organizations, and no one is putting their feet to the fire. Okay, they aren't. They are putting their feet to the fire and saying, look, this is a federal mandate. What are you doing about providing transportation for your people?
Yeah. Okay.
So, it is a huge problem. Give you that. Okay. Off my soap opera there for a little bit. To fund, we are still funded by the federal 5311, which came out of Section 18. It was expanded in 2020 by COVID-19 related funding. It was under CARES. Luckily, we were a freestanding not-for-profit by that time, so we managed to stay open through PPP until CARES funding began to flow in. So I can probably say we never closed a day. We were considered an essential service. We kept all our staff. They had to work. They couldn't, of course, work from home. That wasn't possible. And we soldiered through, which was terrific. I love my staff. I just love them. We still have the Downstate Operating Assistance Program, or DOAP, incredibly important. We're so fortunate to have that. Again, we have service contracts with NFPs, and I'll come back to that. We are a certified Medicaid transportation provider. That doesn't mean they're required to use us, which is too bad. And then once a year, we do send out letters to our villages, townships, and counties requesting a donation. So those are the primary funding sources we have. Then COVID hit, because we were rolling along, getting really creative is great. And a lot of it just came to a screeching halt with COVID. And we have not recovered. We're much more fortunate in this state than many states because of state funding and support. And it's, of course, the coattails also of Chicago. Public transit cannot stop in Chicago. It can't. It's a transit-dependent city. So as the state deals with Chicago, it also deals statewide with all transit. So we're very, very fortunate there. But you can see our ridership really took a nosedive. We're gradually coming up, but we're still low. Why are we low? We lost 2 adult day centers in this area. In Bloomington Normal, we lost it was Advocate Broman Adult Day. Fantastic program. We brought in 3 buses a day to that program. It was great because we provided the transit. They expanded their service area to the entire county. This was fantastic. Folks who had disabilities or cognitive issues and living with other family members, they could come in for the day. They had a fantastic program there, and it allowed the families to continue working. It made intergenerational families work. That closed, and it's not opening up. It may still be on Carl's, not Carl, brain death, the one who bought Advocate Broman.
Carl.
Was it Carl?
Yeah,
Okay.
Carl.
It's late in the day. I start my day, by the way, at 3:20, so I blame that all on my own. They still have it advertised, but it's effectively closed. We lost the one sponsored by St. Mary's in Decatur. This is a huge loss to these communities, and it hasn't been replaced. Area Agency on Aging is looking into it and seeing what they can do. But I just can't imagine what these families are doing. That's a service that allowed families to stay together. It was really great. But that affected our ridership and our money, but most of all, it affected the quality of life within our communities. The other thing that Area Agency on Aging is looking at, and so are psychologists, is as we try to encourage seniors to leave their homes, they are not leaving their homes. And they did a research, and I haven't looked into this research, but at one of the last meetings with Area Agency on Aging, some professionals estimate that the loss of social activity and connection for seniors is as detrimental to health as smoking. So they see it as a health issue, but the problem is how do you change the habits of 2 years for our seniors? And that's a real challenge. We have a new grant to try to encourage the riding thing. But again, if people lose that habit of getting out, it's hard to get them back. So that's a real worry for us. Our services did not quit masking until April 18th, 2022. And I was sad to see it go. We've had a lot of COVID in our staff, and it really worries me because we pick up so many people who are high risk. But in any case, the masking ended April 18th. FTA stepped in, which was fantastic, and said, look, people are at home, they don't have food, go ahead if you can and deliver food. So we partner with Mobile Meals on Wheels, food pantries, and from the beginning of COVID to the end, until FTA called a halt to it, we were allowed to use our buses until January 20th, 2022 to deliver food and basic needs all over our counties, which was fantastic. Not only for the population, but it kept our drivers busy, it kept our staff up. It was great on many levels. I was sad to see it go, but at that point, FTA decided people should be getting out, which of course, health-wise, we probably should. But COVID's had a huge impact. We haven't seen the end of it. I'm beginning to think we're almost beginning to see the worst of the backlash right now. We lost, of course, revenue, as I said, through fares and loss of social service contracts. We still don't collect fares. We don't want that close of contact with our drivers and our riders, because again, we do have a fairly high infection rate with drivers. And it was not an important part of our fares, of our income. It was only about 5%. So we could give it up, like CTA could not. CTA is required to almost get 50% of their expenses covered by fares. They can't give it up, but we can, at least at this point. And we do have CARES money to see us through another 12 months maybe. We're frantically looking at what do we do, as that dries up, how do we replace with our Medicaid that has bottomed out during COVID. And that will be a challenge. And employee recruitment, we sailed through the worst of COVID with our staff intact, but people retired and trying to replace them has been an absolute nightmare. And we've never had this problem before, we are now. On top of that, the federal government did mandate new safety precautions for CDL drivers. New CDL drivers, they must go to school. If you're going to get a passenger endorsement, you must go to school. That's a huge barrier for a lot of people. I've heard it costs from $4,000 to $6,000 to do that. We became a certified training site for passenger endorsements and a certified training site for CDL licenses B, up to B, trying to recruit people. That's helped a little bit, but it's still an uphill battle. We pay well for not-for-profits. We're, kind of at the top for drivers of not-for-profits. But if you look at Walmart or just about anyone else, driver, we can't compete. We're seeing a lot, we can't get new vehicles. At a recent conference, they said, conservatively speaking, we're 6 years behind in building buses, especially gas and diesel buses. Most of the real profit and push is toward electric, which is great. In rural areas, the estimate for a bus, if you turn off the heating, air conditioning, and don't run the lift, is probably 100 miles for electric. We only have one route that only goes 100 miles in a day. Our routes are very long. So electric is not a possibility for us right now that we can see. So we're looking at, oh my goodness, we still need those gas and diesel or some other alternative fuel source. They're about 6 years behind. So we're in trouble there. Parts are unbelievably hard to come by, just unbelievably hard. And then you get into where the mechanics go. I don't know. We need another mechanic on show bus. We have a fantastic mechanic. I don't even want to think about how much overtime the poor guy does. He can't keep up. We can't hire a mechanic. And all the shops we work with have a lot of trouble maintaining mechanics. So that's huge. It's impacting us also as we try to complete our capital projects, trying to get construction workers in and architecture and engineering. It's really an uphill battle to keep that all up. So we're doing our best, but wow, we're still seeing a lot of impact from COVID. And I don't think it's going to stop in the near future. So what's our challenge? We have so many challenges. I didn't even change this slide. Be optimistic. Go back to pre-challenge, pre-COVID. Then okay. Our big plus is we really believe in partnerships, and we're very fortunate in the partnerships we participate in, both with the counties and with social service agencies, and we got to keep pushing those partnerships. Sometimes it's difficult because they have lost so much staff. It's unbelievable. If I started saying, if I go to another meeting where someone else is retiring, I'm just going to sit down and bawl. I mean, I understand people need to retire, but right now it's just such a loss. There's a lot of expertise walking out the door, just real scary. But partnerships are hugely important to us. And so we try to coordinate our appointments and transportation needs with our partners. I'm always asked, how do you coordinate with the urbans? Because we have urban systems in the big cities where we run around. And the answer is we do as much as possible. Sometimes we coordinate tremendously on certain routes. Certain of our routes in certain of our counties are heavily low-income work-related. They don't need some of the special services we provide. They just need transportation into the city. Those folks are perfect for transferring on to the urban system, and it works beautifully. Our problem is if we have someone who has cognitive issues or has a physical disability, we cater to that. We can't, put that pressure on the urban paratransit system because that just runs their cost up ridiculously high. It makes it more difficult for our riders. So by and large, a lot of times we cannot coordinate for the good of our riders. And also for the health of the urban systems, they for sure do not need more ridership on their paratransit systems. So, and then on top of that, emergent needs. We're getting older. We got to deal with that. And so we're seeing increasing disability. Folks are driving longer for sure than they used to, but when they stop driving, they have many multiple needs, and we need to be there for them to provide safe, efficient, and caring transportation alternatives to car. And the last slide, I think it's the last one, yes. I always tell new hires, if you want to know what we're all about, it comes down to our mission statement. If we stray away from that, I tell folks, let us know because we're doing something really wrong. And it says, we recognize that mobility is a fundamental right for our citizens and an essential need to maintain a high quality of life. We at Showbus, therefore, dedicate ourselves to provide safe, dependable, economical, as much as we can, and courteous, absolutely, transportation options tailored to the unique needs and challenges of the communities and individuals we serve. Further, we will provide this service in a manner consistent with our stewardship of the community's trust and resources. And that's it. It's a personal failure for us if we can't meet someone's needs with transportation, no matter what it takes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Can you take some questions?
Absolutely.
You're very passionate about what you do.
Oh, yeah.
I think there's a lot of things in our community that the public doesn't understand or value. We see the show bus, but who are those people? What do they do? And so kind of hard to blow your own horn and spend dollars saying, here's what we do. But
when did you start with Showbus, Laura?
Me personally,
Yes.
2001.
Okay. So you were starting about the time you and I first met. 'Cause,
Yes.
That's when I moved here and was attending the same meetings with you.
Yeah.
Well,
A little while ago.
thank you for serving all this time.
Oh, absolutely.
And with that passion, I hope you keep it up.
Oh, yeah. They will have to haul me out.
Yeah, today is the first time I understood where the word show came from.
That was something I didn't know. Living in the rural community, I feel like I should have known that. I had no idea. I always wondered
We
why
kind
it
of
was
bury
called
that.
It's a little bit of an impediment for you guys, though. I mean, just
Yes,
because
I know,
it's not self-explanatory at all.
I
so.
know.
Yeah, but how do you get rid of it? Because it's so ingrained in
Yeah.
people's minds.
Right.
For you to change your brand would make no sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
That's right.
I remember years ago asking people why it was called that, and I never ran into anybody that knew.
Yeah, we kind of buried that. That one term really went out of acceptable use. So.
John, can I make a quick comment? Just very quickly. Several of you have commented on Laura's passion for this work. You haven't seen anything. It's astounding what she does with limited resources, constant, not exactly barriers, but difficulties presented by dealing with the state. And the fact that, conditions keep changing. I've worked with her for almost as long as she's been at Showbus, starting like 3 3 weeks after I came to regional planning. And I am continually in awe of what she achieves, despite the incredible barriers. Anything you can do from your own positions to sort of help encourage the state support of rural public transportation is a great gift, not only to McLean County, but across the state. It really is important. And it's one of the huge lessons I've learned in my time here. I don't know how she does it. I really don't. But I'm glad that you're attending more of it. I keep pushing until it's not there to push anymore.
Well, hopefully we won't have many days like today.
Oh, gosh. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
How much more could the role grow from a local county and municipal standpoint as far as funding is concerned? Because I know you said it's more of a, we go and we get kind of a, I don't want to misquote, but a donation of anything, basically. I mean, at some point in time, probably the most benefit comes from those very entities. Is there a way we could help push that? I mean, I'm not saying we, but just we as citizens and folks involved. I know that may not be our role as a planning commission, but
Yeah.
That we as citizens of McLean County or any of the other counties you serve, we can push at that local level. Because I know pushing the state funding thing at the state level is like pushing a rope. So I did that for a long time, way back in my life, and you can't believe a turnip.
Yeah, that we pulled the dope funding is phenomenal from the state, and certainly a huge exception to most state funding.
Right.
So when I go to my meetings with my social service agency partners, I kind of hang my head because they're in such dire straits, and we're much more protected because we do have the dope. I will say that in our established counties, which of course McLean is one, and Livingston or Iroquois for the older ones, the townships are extraordinarily generous, really. And it comes out of their, they have a certain requirement to help people who are in poverty, and they always share with us that money. And then of course their folks ride free. One thing we always do, if it's an impediment to ride with fares, we make sure they don't pay. So the support has been wonderful, especially on the township level where they have a fund like that. With the counties, some of the counties are pushed to the wall.
No, I understand.
It's really hard. And McLean County has been fantastic just in that they provide so much expertise and shepherding through grants and listening to me scream in agony. And without that expertise, not only would it be hard for us, but it'd be next to impossible to maintain it in the smaller counties. It would be just too much of a burden.
So the fight is really not fight, but the battle is really at the more state level where we need to try to bolster those funds probably from that direction more than trying to reach to,
Yeah, and federal too. I mean, there's still, if you look at the funding on the federal level, per capita, rural is a fraction of what is allocated to per capita urban. And that's just the way it is, and it always has been, because we are the poor, pitiful stepchild. But, you know, I can't complain. They certainly came through for us during COVID. But I would like to see some acknowledgement on the federal level that rural transit plays a critical role. State, boy, we're in great shape compared to just about any other social service.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I talked too long. Sorry.
Well, you're welcome to stay if you wish.
Stay if you want. Or she might be tired.
I am a little tired, yeah.
I'm going to ask Ray now to bring us up to date on regional housing initiatives.
Yeah, well, just really quick on the regional housing initiative update. And I'm also sitting in for the housing planner that we try to hire someday. But we're doing interviews. Thank you all.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
just really quick, Housing Assistance Coalition that you were familiar with, the cases of the calls that we received back in October compared to August and September, it dropped, just FYI. And then Salvation Army Homeless Shelter, they have reopened for intakes in mid-November because the winter months, then there's more outflow, more people needing the shelters. And we also MCRPC staff has been participating in a subcommittee of the coalition. It's related to warming centers planning, especially for homeless folks during the days of really extreme low temperature. That's regarding the Housing Assistance Coalition, and then separately, regional housing staff committees, because we do on a regular basis have two committees, housing committees that we run. As you recall, we mentioned last time that there's a white paper on income qualified housing issues. There's the 2022 version has been approved by the housing staff committee. And so we have posted that on the website, our website. And you would note, and among other things, you will note that the county currently has 2,435 income qualified housing units and 640 housing choice vouchers. And so actually there's more information and that a few pages of the white paper. If you got chance, feel free to look, visit those on the website with more information. And talking about housing choice vouchers, generally people call it Section 8. The Housing Authority of Bloomington, they have reopened the waiting list just last month, but for a few days, from November 7th to the 10th. And then there were more than 5,000 people who applied. And from those, about 300 who scored higher, they got opportunity to put on the waiting list. And that's just waiting list, not to talk about, just to show the need in our community. Another thing that we have mentioned before, but just want to reiterate that the state have emergency homeowner assistance funds, and that is made available by either Illinois Housing Development Authority, and that is currently opened through January 31st, through the end of January. And so if you know anybody, other organizations that are really trying to provide assistance to homeowners who qualified, you encourage them to apply because they may receive up to $30,000 of assistance in each round. And so there are webinars and information available on the IDA website. That's for the housing updates. Thank you. Any questions? Thanks.
That information is on our website or the housing authorities?
The Section 8 that has already closed, but the Section 8 is that they have some information on their website regarding the homeowner assistance is on either the Illinois Housing Development Authority website. Okay. But if you have any questions, always contact staff and we'll be happy to guide you through that. Thank you. Information.
Do you want to go on with item C, Gray, then?
Yep, we are really quick. We still working with the state on the two IDOT grants related to traffic safety. As you know, that takes processing paperwork. And so that's, and we are still waiting for the SS4A, the Safe Streets and Roads for All, the federal grant application. We should hear sometime in January. So hopefully next month we will hear something. So that's the updates.
Good. And item D, meeting dates?
Yes, if you notice, as part of the agenda packet, we have listed a list of meeting dates for next year. And this is the last meeting, today's last meeting for the year. But 2023, the meeting dates are noted on the, so if you refer to it, but generally we would keep you posted on the different meetings and stuff. But this is something we do every year.
There's some extra copies here if anybody would like a hard copy. Okay, is there any other business that should come before the commission?
If something, again, really quick, if you recall, we mentioned that we lost a staff member, and then subsequently, we also lost another assistant planner to our county IT department. So we're recruiting, in the process of recruiting for 2 openings. So we have done some interviews, and then hopefully there will be some decisions will be made end of this month. So I just want you to be aware of it. So basically, we lost 25% of the staff. But all the remaining staff work really hard trying to provide that coverage. So thank you.
And Ray, when you lose staff, is it because of other opportunities? Is it because of salary? It's probably a little bit of everything for each individual, but it seems like we've had a lot of turnover.
Yes. I think the salary is the major from my assessment. Of course, there are other factors that make the decision, that help them to make the decision. But I think the salary is definitely a major factor. But then also coincide, as you know from the news, they call the Great Resignations, and also some people told me, some HR people told me, they kind of call it reshuffling, not it's a new term, but it's a similar thing. So it's happening. Just unfortunate that we lost two good staff members, but and I wish them well in their career, the decisions that they have to make, and we because the way it's because we're grant funded, and also we are bounded by the county's salary system, and so even though if we have more money available, say from IDOT or from the feds, whatever reasons, more grant money funding available, it's hard for us to make the adjustments. Now, I will point out that the county just recently salary study completed. So actually they will be implementing that as 2023. And so that helps a lot. And also that would put us even more competitive than some other NPOs, such as ours in the region. And anything helps. But yeah, I think money, to be honest, is a major factor.
I've communicated to Ray that I think we must do very good staff development, because the 2 we've lost have both gone to other entities in our community.
Yeah.
Because they're known to the planning departments in the towns and in the county.
So you might still see them around. We've seen them in meetings and stuff. And yeah, just a different size of the table.
I think one of them was kind of pinched by our last executive director. To the top of normal.
I have to talk to her about it.
Is there any other business we should bring up? Or anybody online have anything they want to bring up? Hearing none, I'll call for a motion to adjourn. Bart? Second, Jim. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? Motion carries.
Happy